Hello, and thank you so much for joining me tonight. Now, we still don't have any answers on why Tucker Carlson was let go from Fox News. We only have speculations, but there are some thoughts that I wanted to share about it. Now, I worked in corporate media for nearly 15 years back when I hosted a syndicated radio show for iHeartMedia and also a company that is now called Odyssey. Many have this notion that hosts and personalities are told by their corporate bosses what they should and shouldn't say, but it doesn't quite work like that. Now, I was never told what I could or couldn't say, not when I was on the radio, nor when I was at the Hill hosting Rising. The way corporate bosses control what goes out over their airwaves is by controlling who does the talking. Outlets hire people who share their worldview. They look for people who naturally will say the things that they once said. MSNBC is naturally going to hire hosts who have a liberal worldview. Fox is going to hire those with a conservative worldview. This happens at every news outlet. People are hired who share the views of the bosses. People who don't share it don't get hired. Now, sometimes someone will be hired who doesn't share the worldview, but the bosses are trying something new to see if they can boost the ratings. And in those moments, they care more about money than they do about the message because they know that without the money, they can't share any more messages. Their operation would go under. So in some cases, they will gamble with putting on someone with different views to boost ratings and hope that the person doesn't go too far off the rails from the message the corporate overlords once shared. And sometimes people just change. A host starts off with one worldview, but then evolves into another. Either way, when the person deviates too far from the message the bosses want heard, they get canned. It doesn't matter how popular they are or how big of ratings they get for the outlet, the bosses will rein in one way or another if they view things as going too far off the rails from the message they once shared, no matter how popular the host is. Now, whether Tucker started off as an anti-establishment populist or whether he evolved into one, either way, he was too far off the message establishment elites like Rupert Murdoch wanted shared. Tucker was dangerous because Tucker sowed more doubt in our institutions than any other news broadcaster. He called out the military industrial complex, the World Economic Forum, Big Pharma, the CIA, and the FBI. Finally, someone on the nightly news was doing their job and calling them out publicly and boldly. He resonated with audiences from across the political spectrum because we share something in common. We know we're being lied to. And Tucker publicly pointed it out. Rather than hyper focusing on culture war issues or obsessing over Democrats like so many of his counterparts, which he did those things, but not to a hyper or obsessive way, Tucker was calling out instead the real problems we face as Americans, problems deeply rooted in our institutions. The one thing the establishment fears more than anything is a wide awake America. They prefer us to be at each other's throats, fighting about wokeism and racism. They want us to hate each other so we don't look at what they're doing and hate them instead. The elites collectively loathed January 6th because it was the one time people placed their anger squarely in the right place, directly at them. Rather than taking to the streets in violent riots, burning down small mom and pop shops, protesters took to Washington, where the real problems stem from. They called into question whether or not we're truly a free people and a democracy, and we've seen how they reacted to it. When people take to the streets, they don't seem to pay any attention. But when they take it to Washington, they immediately roll out numerous counterterrorism measures, put barricades in place, and label the American people as dangerous. Now, Tucker amplified the very real anger, suspicion, and sentiments of the American people, and he eventually was canned for it. He was considered too dangerous because he kept Americans wide awake and tuned into the corruption and sinister motives of the ruling class. Our government and the elites despise us. They think they know better than us, and they're going to ensure they maintain a tight grip on power. And in order to do that, they need a tight grip on the narrative and a tight grip over who ends up in charge. Now, Rupert Murdoch is all in on Ron DeSantis. He's a mega donor. He's given him a book deal ahead of the presidential election, and he's told people he intends to pivot the Fox News network away from Donald Trump by making him a non-person and instead focus on DeSantis. He even admitted it would be difficult to do given the audience, but he was confident it could be done. Trump, like Tucker, is too dangerous to the establishment's grip on power. He wants to upend everything, and they have done everything they can to stop him and silence him. DeSantis at times seems to share Trump's populist vision for America, which is why he himself became so popular. but he's showing signs of shifting towards the establishment, and Trump's best shot at DeSantis has been pointing this out. DeSantis, by the way, is currently on an international tour to Japan, South Korea, London, and Israel, where he's already begun pledging America's military support, which is opposite of Trump's stance, opposite of Tucker Carlson's opinions, but very much in line with the establishment who is funding his campaign, his shadow campaign, his non-campaign. He's not officially running, so he says, but he's on an international tour. Now, many are rightfully suspicious that Ron DeSantis will be no different than the rest, someone who seems promising at first, but ultimately their desire for power supersedes their desire to serve the needs of the American people. And you can bet Tucker would have been calling this out, much to Murdoch's dismay, and Murdoch put a stop to it. DeSantis will win the GOP nomination at all costs if the establishment has its say, and a powerful news personality platforming Trump is just too far off the elite's consensus rails to keep around. Trump is dangerous, Tucker is dangerous, and anyone dangerous must be silenced. Someone else viewed as threatening, who is challenging the establishment, but from the other side of the aisle, is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. RFK Jr. is challenging Joe Biden for the Democratic nomination, something Joe Biden just announced today that he intends to seek. Now, Joe Biden is unpopular with the people, but he's beloved by the establishment because he can be controlled. He's spent his entire career being a part of the establishment, and now the establishment seems to control him since he's either obviously in a mental decline or he's just happy to be sitting in the Oval Office and is willing to do whatever they want as long as he can continue playing president. To hell with what the people want. 70% of Americans think Biden shouldn't seek a second term, including 51% of Democrats. Nonetheless, the establishment DNC has said they're supporting Joe Biden's reelection and have no plans to sponsor a Democratic primary debate, despite the fact there are two other official candidates in the running, Marianne Williamson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Everything must be controlled, from the narratives in the media to the people in power, and the establishment elites will do everything they can to ensure it. Joining us now is one of the Democratic challengers to Joe Biden and a challenger to the establishment in general, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kim.
Does this give you second thoughts about running as a Democrat? That's my big criticism about your campaign, is that you're running as a Democrat. You won't give it up. I feel like you should run as an independent. They're not going to give you the platform and the time that you deserve, especially for a party that claims they're all about democracy. This seems to be antithetical to democracy. How are you going to get around this blockade that they're clearly putting up?
Well, I will point out that if I did run as an independent, there are no primaries there, and there are no debates either. But I'm running. The Democratic Party is my home. I feel like the Democratic Party has lost its bearings. It's become the war party. It's become the party of censorship. It's become the party of corporate control and big pharma. It's become the party of fear, and that I need to do whatever I can to reclaim the party to what it used to be, the party of JFK, of FDR, of Robert Kennedy. And so I'm very peaceful with the choice that I've made. I hope that President Biden will change his mind and that he will engage in debates and some or town halls or retail politics of some kind. I think the people of this country deserve that. I intend to run a campaign against Mr. Biden or President Biden that is congenial, that is respectful, that has decorum. I have known Joe Biden for 40 years. I have a friendship with him, as does everybody in my family. But I differ with him, I would say, fiercely on some of the issues. And so, this one is not going to be a personal battle, but it's going to be an ideological battle, and it's going to be a battle about policies. And I'm going to take it to the Democratic Party in whatever way I can.
Yeah, I mean, you're just not going against Joe Biden only. You're going against the entire Democratic machine that's probably lost its way, not just this election cycle or the previous election cycle, but many years ago. When do you feel the Democratic Party really did make a departure from Kennedy Democrats to what it is today?
It's been a slow evolution, but I don't know. I think during COVID, it really I watched what happened with the party kind of becoming the Big Pharma Party, and I watched that for many years. Traditionally Democrats did not take money from big corporations. There were, of course, exceptions, but most Democrats wouldn't take money from oil, from coal companies. They wouldn't take money from tobacco companies. They wouldn't take money from the big chemical manufacturers and other people who were polluting. And some of them, like Elizabeth Warren, wouldn't take money from the financial sector, from the big banks, et cetera. But during the Obama administration, when President Obama was trying to pass health care, he needed to get the pharmaceutical companies on his side. And because without their support, he simply could not have passed it. And so the Democrats made a deal with the devil and made it. The deal was, of course, that when they passed Obamacare, that the government would not negotiate over pharmaceutical product prices, which was a huge boondoggle and a huge bonanza the pharmaceutical industry. But with that deal nailed down, the pharmaceutical industry started to pour money into the Democratic Party, and it became permissible for Democrats to accept pharmaceutical money. So before that, Democrats really only had two big sources of money. One was the labor unions, and the other was trial lawyers. But otherwise, there was no industry that was a big industry that they could take money from. And suddenly, the Democrats had pharma on their side, and a lot of them started taking pharmaceutical money. And then, but pharma gives it equally to the Republicans. Now more to the Democrats, but at that point, it was equally the Republicans. And in 2016, when President Trump ran, the President Trump during the election on 3 or 4 occasions mentioned that he believed that vaccines were causing the autism epidemic, or had something to do with it. And the Democrats prior to that were Democrats and Republicans were evenly split on vaccine issues. But once President Trump came forward and made those statements, that the vaccine issue was put in the same kind of anti-science dumpster by Democrats as climate change, and it became a tribal issue. It became a wedge issue, and it became a defining issue. If you were pro-vaccine, then you were Democrat, and if you were skeptical, then you could be Republican. And that during COVID, that division kind of there was COVID poured concrete on that division.
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of industry capture of both parties, but the Democratic Party certainly has gone all in on that of late, since as you mentioned, the Obama administration, and now we're even seeing the military-industrial complex pouring money into the Democratic Party. So, if you were to get into the Oval Office, how could you unravel this type of industry capture? I feel like you'd have to start a movement that would include not only you being elected, but many members of Congress would need to be elected as well who share the same sentiment as you. But one thing we've learned over the years is many of us who were very supportive of, let's say, progressive candidates who said that they were going to go in there and make change, they got in there and they just seem to fall right into the fold. I don't know what happens. I don't know if, those of us sitting on the outside of the Beltway don't know if, are they being threatened? I mean, are their families being threatened? How is it that they go in there with this idea that they're going to shake things up, and then suddenly they just fall right on in line? And we see, even AOC, who tried to make waves when she first got there, now is like all about Mama Bear Nancy Pelosi. And so it seems like you would have to get a lot more people involved in order to unravel the industry capture of Congress, which is really the ones making these types of decisions. How could you possibly get around all of that, do you think?
Well, I would say I have like a PhD in how to unravel agency capture because I've been suing these agencies for so many years. And when you do litigation, probably 20% of my losses, 80% were against polluters. 20% were against the agencies that are enabling the polluters. So I've been involved in litigation, many, many cases with EPA, which is captured by oil, by coal, by pesticide, by big chemical. I've litigated, of course, against HHS and the pharmaceutical industry, which owns NIH, CDC, and FDA. I've litigated against the FDA, against the USDA, Department of Agriculture, because it's captured by Smithfield and Tyson and Bo Pilgrim and Cargill and Monsanto. And then I've been, the CIA is also captured by the military industrial complex. And all of these agencies, those umbilical cords to industry have to be broken. They're basically functioning as wholly owned subsidiaries for the industries they're supposed to regulate. And most politicians get in there hoping to drain the swamp. But they're confronted by these huge bureaucracies, and the bureaucracies have the power and the capacity to commit civil disobediences against their leader. So if you start messing with some of these agencies, the lights will go off and the trains will stop, and things that will happen that will be political problems for the president. And when the president gets in and he's confronted with these entrenched agencies cultures, what they end up doing is appointing somebody safe to run that agency, usually somebody from industry who gets the joke, right, who understands who's safe. And then that person is not interested in changing industry culture. But I come in with, I'm not intimidated by the agencies. I know how they work and I know how to change them. And most of those changes you do not need Congress for. President Trump could have done it, had the power to do it himself, and President Biden has the power to do it himself. And I'll give you an example. With a stroke of the pen, you can change back the rule that allows pharmaceutical advertisers to do direct to consumer ads on television. That's one of the big problems. That's why one of the reasons we have this entrenched agency capture, not only of Congress, because they control the airwaves, they control the evening news. 75% of the revenues for those evening news shows for, Anderson Cooper is coming from Pfizer and other pharmaceutical companies. So, and those companies are dictating content on those shows, and they dictate the official narratives. And they're able then to exercise huge control over Congress. So Congress is terrified of them. But with a stroke of the pen, you can say this is not good for the health of our country, which it isn't. We spend 3 times more than any other country for pharmaceutical drugs because of all this advertising. And we have the worst health outcomes of any, I think we're 79th in the world in health outcomes, because there's only rules that allow pharmaceutical advertising on TV. One is New Zealand, the other is US. Stop that overnight as president. Another thing that I can do is I can open up all the databases. Right now, all the databases that you can actually check the efficacy and the safety of vaccines, like the vaccine safety database. It's the top, all the vaccine records and the medical claims for 10 million Americans from the top 10 HMOs. Well, you can look in there, and overnight you can say, oh, this vaccine is associated with diabetes, this one's associated with peanut allergies, this one's associated with ASD, neurological tics, or whatever. That database, CDC keeps it in a lockbox like Fort Knox and makes sure no scientist is allowed in there. Well, I'll open up that database on day one. And, I'll also, I'll bring all the medical journals, the New England Journal of Medicine, the Lancet, JAMA, into the Justice Department as soon as I appoint an AG. And I'll say to them, you guys are part of a racketeering syndicate. You're collaborating with these pharmaceutical industry to lie to the American public about the efficacy and safety of these products, and you're causing enormous harm. And we are going to sue you both civilly for damages, and we're going to sue you criminally, unless you come up with a plan right now as to how you're going to stop doing that. So I have 100 things that I'm going to do immediately to unravel the agency capture in these agencies. I'm going to, the USDA was created to help the small farmer. They're doing the opposite. Their job now is to make sure that large corporate farms crush the small American farmer. And we can't have democracy for long if the American small independent freeholds have completely lost control of the landscapes. I'll give you an example. Smithfield Foods, the company I litigated against a lot, it basically invented a kind of farming, factory farming for pork. And this was in the early 80s. They built a huge slaughterhouse in in North Carolina. They slaughtered 30,000 pigs a day, and they dropped the price of hogs at 32 cents a pound from 60 cents a pound, or 2 cents a pound from 60 cents a pound. They put out of business 28,000 independent hog farmers, and they got control. There's now 1,800 factories in the state, and 80% of those are controlled by this one company. So they put out of business all the independent farmers. They now control the landscapes of North Carolina and the food production in this country. And then they sold themselves to the Chinese. So now you have a Chinese company that controls the landscapes and food production, not only in North Carolina, but Iowa and all over the country. And that's not good for our country. And USDA abets that is a colonial model. You have a foreign country that is coming in and stealing our natural resources, polluting the landscapes, poisoning our rivers, 14 rivers poisoned in North Carolina. And and they control food production in this country. And USDA is abetting those kind of policies. So, we shouldn't be doing that. And I will end that overnight.
The speaking of the small farmers, one question that I think a lot of people have is, we all know that you're an environmentalist. You've been an environmentalist for a long time, fighting against pollution, fighting against many things that have to do with the environment. But there's a lot of questions about climate change, and what we've seen around the world is that many of the climate change policies that are enacted by certain countries, like the Netherlands or in Sri Lanka, we see that it crushes the small farmers, that they cannot keep up with the big farms. They don't have enough land in order to do some of the more natural ways to fertilize the land. And so some of these policies are really crushing the small farms. Where do you stand on climate policies that are being enacted right now? There is a difference between environmentalism and climate change. Where do you stand on all of that? And what types of policies do you support?
Climate, the climate issues and pollution issues are being exploited by, the World Economic Forum and Bill Gates and all of these big, mega billionaires, the same way that COVID was exploited, to use it as an excuse to clamp down, top-down totalitarian controls on society, and then to give us engineering solutions. And if you look closely, as it turns out, the guys who are promoting those engineering solutions are the people who own the IPs, the patents for those solutions. Oh, it's a way, it's being used. They've given climate chaos a bad name, because people now see that it's just another crisis that's being used to strip mine the wealth of the poor and to enrich billionaires. And I for 40 years have had the same policy on climate and engineering. You can go check my speeches from the 1980s, and I've said the most important solution for environmental issues is not top-down controls; it's free market capitalism. And by that, and what we have in this country now is not free market capitalism; it's corporate crony capitalism. It's it's cushy kind of socialism for the rich, and a brutal, barbaric, merciless capitalism for the poor. A true free market promotes efficiency, and efficiency means the elimination of waste, and pollution is waste. In a true free market, you can't. A true free market would require us to properly value our natural resources, and it's the undervaluation of those resources that cause us to use them wastefully. In a true free market, you can't make yourself rich without making your neighbors rich and without enriching your community. But what polluters do is they make themselves rich by making everybody else poor. They raise standards of living for themselves by lowering quality of life for the rest of us, and they do that by escaping the discipline of the free market. You show me a polluter, I'll show you a subsidy. I'll show you a fat cat using political clout to escape the discipline of the free market and force the public to pay its production costs. So, in terms of carbon industry, all of the things that people are trying to do to, promote to end carbon, we should be doing anyway, because carbon means cutting down all of the mountains in West Virginia. It means, we polluted 2,200 miles of rivers and streams in the eastern Kentucky and West Virginia. Every every freshwater fish in America now has mercury in its flesh from coal burning power plants. That is a theft from the public. The waterways and lakes on the high Appalachian, every one of them is now sterilized from acid rain. We need to be reducing, whether you believe in climate change or not, carbon-based climate change, we need to be reducing our dependence on carbon. Carbon receives globally about $5.2 trillion in subsidies a year. If you end those subsidies, carbon cannot compete against more efficient and cleaner energy sources. And that's what we should be doing. We should be ending subsidies for the carbon industry, and we should be using true free market capitalism and finding the most efficient sources of energy.
Do you ever think that maybe you should have run as a Republican? And I say this because um, I feel like you would maybe have a better shot at actually going further on using the Republican Party the way that Trump used it. I don't think he was a true Republican. In fact, he was a Democrat for a long time. Switched because he figured it would be easier to infiltrate that party and actually be able to um, get the nomination, which he was right. He was able to do that. And in doing that, we've seen a shift on the Republican side of the aisle where topics that were never, ever popular with the GOP are suddenly popular. Things like wanting to end wars, going against corporate capture of the government. These are things that, even though the establishment GOP hasn't really, they're definitely pushing back on, they're definitely doing everything they can to halt the populism, the rise of populism on the Republican side. But it's malleable. There's room there, and they do seem to have a more democratic process. So, what did you even consider possibly? Because many of your messages, I think, resonate not just with Democrats. We've seen your polling numbers increase on the Democratic side with voters that voted for Joe Biden. Now, do you have the latest on that? I know that they went from 10% to 14%. I'm sure they're just climbing, which is probably why Democrats are saying no debates. We don't want any debates. We don't want any actual challenge. But you do have a lot of support from independents, from Republicans, and running as a Democrat. There's a lot of Republicans that aren't going to switch over to the Democratic Party in order to vote in the primary. Some states it's open, but other states it's not. So, did you even maybe consider that? Because you do have so much support on both sides of the aisle, actually, and especially amongst independents.
No, I really feel, Kim, like I need to reclaim the Democratic Party, and I feel like I have an opportunity to maybe do the same thing with the Democratic Party that Trump did with the Republican Party, which is to remind it of its populist roots and to reinvigorate the Democratic Party as a populist party. So that's and I think that's important. I think that the path that the Democratic Party is on right now is a bad path. I think that it's shocking to me that it's become the war party. I mean, they're both parties of the war party, and that it's the party promoting censorship. And the word liberal means freedom of speech, and yet President Biden and his in the advertisement the announcement that he released today, the big issue in it was freedom of speech. And I think we really do need freedom of speech, and that was that's ironic. But I'm glad that President Biden reminded us that that's an important value of the Democratic Party, and I hope that I can continue to remind Democrats of their roots.
Well, one way that Trump was able to actually make change in the Republican Party was that he got so much media attention in 2016, leading up to the 2016 election. And that is not what's happening for you. They're suppressing information. In fact, Reuters, I'm sure you saw this ridiculous article that they came out with titled Fact Box 2024 US Presidential Election: Who's in, who's out, and who's still thinking about it. They list all of these candidates. Everybody's name is in bold. Then your name pops up, and suddenly your name's not in bold. Yours is the only one whose name is not in bold. Everyone else's is in bold. And then they also just completely left out Marianne Williamson, who's also running on the in the Democratic Party. So they're not going to give you the media attention. They're not going to even entertain in the way that they did for Trump in 2016. So the media blockade is going to be a big thing that is going to be difficult to get around. And now we're even seeing, like, with Tucker Carlson being fired from Fox News, I'm sure that would have been a show you would have been invited on, and you've been, to help boost your campaign. Now that's gone. I suspect largely because he platforms people like Trump, like yourself, like others who are genuinely challenging the establishment. So it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult, I think. But I'm really hopeful for you and your campaign. I definitely I see that people are from both sides of the aisle very much enthusiastic about you and the policies that you stand for that are very, very different from what we're hearing from the establishment. One last real question on this is um, you're not, again, you're going up against so much, but one of the things that you would be going up against is the establishment is very dangerous, I would say. And like I mentioned, maybe even threatening. I don't know what they do to these candidates who get in office who have anti-establishment views and then suddenly don't. It's really suspicious for people like us looking on the outside that they are maybe threatening them with violence, potentially with their lives, and you have experience with this in your own family. Are you worried that they will eh, really try to silence your campaign in ways um, that would be permanent?
Well, yeah, I don't worry about that stuff. I mean, there's things that, first of all, I'm not worried about getting in power and then compromising my value. I've watched the same thing my whole life, and just been baffled by it. How people that, uh, you're eating peanut butter jelly sandwiches and you're all talking about the same thing, and then they get into office and they become a different person. They get an appointment or something, and it baffled me. But um, I am confident enough about myself, and I'm secure enough about my values that I feel like I'm impervious to any kind of external influence. I'm not going to do what people want me to do. I'm going to do what I believe is right, and I think I've shown that, over the past couple of years to people, that they can have faith in me that whatever happens, I'm going to do. I may not do what they want me to do, but I'm going to do what I believe is right. I'm going to listen to people. In terms of my physical safety, I don't worry about that. I take care. I'm not going to be stupid. I'm not going to make it easy for people, but there's things that I worry about a lot more than dying. There's a lot worse things than death. And one of those for me would be to have my kids grow up in a world, America, where they didn't have their constitutional rights, and where they didn't have the opportunities and hope and idealism and pride in their country that I do. And I feel like, there was a generation in 1776 that put everything on the line to give us these constitutional rights. They put their property, their livelihoods, their reputation, and their lives, and a lot of them died, to give us what we've got here today. And if we lose the courage of our convictions, that we will lose all of those gifts they gave us. And that's not gonna be a consideration for me.
Well, how's your campaign going? Are you on the campaign trail now?
I'm in New York today, and I'll be in New Hampshire tomorrow doing a talk up in Hanover, New Hampshire. Um, and it's good so far. It's the reception that I'm getting is very good, And, as you said, the polling is very good. And I am getting on some, I'm going to do Good Morning America tomorrow or on Thursday, and Nightline. And, they're taped. So they're not going to put me on live, but they'll put me on tape so that they can cut it if I say something dangerous or disagreeable, something that puts, dangerous thoughts in people's heads. But at least they're letting me on, and that's something they haven't done in years.
Yeah,
So we'll see what happens. I
it's great.
hopefully, the conservative media lets me on, and I mean, Tucker's show was a loss because Tucker had the biggest Democratic audience on TV. He had more um, Democrats watching him in most demographics than Rachel Maddow. And Rachel Maddow, was kind of the next up. But a lot of people watch Tucker who are not Republicans, and he had 3.5 million on an average night and 5 million on a really good night, and that his average night was 10 times CNN's average. So he was talking to a lot of people. It's kind of shocking that they threw him off. But he was saying things that nobody has ever said on TV before. He
Yeah.
was talking about, advertisers dictating content, pharmaceutical advertisers getting people getting newscasters on the networks to say things about vaccines that weren't true, you know, and nobody's ever talked like that. That was on his April 19th show, and 5 days later he was off. So I don't know whether that's why he got kicked off, but I'm sure that the advertisers were really angry at him.
Yeah. He was just, I think, all around threatening to the establishment. And we're coming up to a big election. And Rupert Murdoch has pretty much gone all in on Ron DeSantis. And wants Fox to completely pivot. And once, he was notorious for saying that he wanted Trump to be a non-person. And really, I think that the establishment, again, it goes down, comes back to they'll do anything to silence a person. If you're calling out the establishment, if you're changing minds in America, or you're at least echoing the sentiments that many Americans are feeling, which is that the establishment's against us, that we don't really have a true democracy, that we're not really running the show. If you say that and it resonates with people, that's considered very dangerous. And we've seen them go after Trump, legally attempting to, they've tried to impeach him twice, trying to throw numerous lawsuits against him, trying to make it to where it's impossible for him to run again. Same thing with now Tucker's off the air. Who knows where he'll land? They're putting your name in fine print. They're saying we're not going to even have a debate so that you can't even get on the stage and actually challenge some of these questions. So
And
they
they're,
will do
they're
anything and
throwing,
everything to go ahead.
yeah, they're throwing New Hampshire out of the political process, which
Right.
is extraordinary. New Hampshire is kind of the last democracy, is the last vestige of real democracy in this country because you can go up there and, campaign without having any money, and you do real retail politics. And the people up there are, it's an industry there, and they're interested, they're engaged, they change their minds. They don't make up their minds till the last minute. They vet politicians for the rest of the country the way that it does the rest of the country. The politicians can fly over and aerial bombard the state with advertising, with $1 billion campaign. They never have to go shake a hand or answer a question. But if you want to win New Hampshire, you got to go up there and you have to meet people, and you have to be grilled by the old lady who reads the Financial Times every day, and she's doing a question and a follow-up question and another one. And you get the kind of vetting that you get if you're running for city council. And they're really providing a service for the whole country. But, Joe Biden has not done well there. He came in fifth the last time. So they've had that first primary there for 100 years. And now, the DNC is taking it away from them because, it has the optics of looking like they want to rig the process, that they don't want democracy. And right now, Particularly I think the Democratic Party should be showing the world that we really are committed to democracy. We should have debates. We should have town halls. We should have real people rather than just the president talking just to fundraisers. He should be talking to real people, people who run gas stations and diners, and seeing the suffering that's going on in rural America and urban America. And you're not going to get that in these other campaigns. They come in a bubble, protected by Secret Service with a 25-foot barrier between them and the crowds. They never have to talk to anybody. They give a speech and then they leave in a helicopter. And it's not democracy. It's not. It doesn't really even have the appearance of democracy. And getting rid of New Hampshire is a bad optics, I think, for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I don't think it's optics. I think that that's I think that they're no longer a Democratic Party, despite the name, and this is very purposeful. I don't think it's anything about optics. I don't think they want a true democracy, and I don't think they have for a really long time. Actually, when we go back and look through the party and how the party's operated, I don't think that they hold. I mean, even you go back to the 60s and it's, they'll just put in a candidate and say, we don't care what the people want. This is the person that we're putting in. So, yeah, I mean, I think it goes beyond optics, but look, thank you so much for being here and best of luck running as a Democrat. You know how I feel about that. One thing that I do have to ask you before we end this is, in the end, and this is what happened in 2020, in the end, when they say, well, Joe Biden's the candidate and that's it, are you going to endorse him for president when
Well,
you decide, if you decide you're not going to run?
I'm in it to win it, so I'm not thinking of a plan B.
Okay. My only advice is don't do that. If it comes down to that, and the Democratic Party is just saying we're not going to put you on the ticket, and that's that. Don't endorse Joe Biden. Pivot. Go independent. Just. But the last thing you should do is say, yeah, this is okay. Fine. Concede. Don't do it. That's just the one thing that I would say. But I
How come you
definitely
how come, how come you have
go
no
ahead.
faith in my candidacy, Kim?
I don't have any faith in the Democratic Party. I have a lot of faith in your campaign. I have no faith at all, zero, zilch, none in the Democratic Party. I don't think that they're going to allow you to become the candidate. I think that they've already shown that, and they're going to put Joe Biden on the ticket, and none of us are going to have a choice about it. I think the only thing you could do is your campaign could continue to grow in momentum, of course, which you are. That would be challenging to the Democratic Party, but they will ensure that the establishment media suppresses that information so that they don't see that you're actually growing, because they know that that would have an avalanche effect. That when people start to see that you're actually growing in the polls and that more people are interested in your message, then others are wanting to check that out. They're going to suppress that. I just have no faith at all in them. So I think it's inevitable that Joe Biden's going to end up being the candidate, and you're going to have to pivot. And that might not be such a bad thing. I think ultimately you could win this. Just I don't know if on the Democratic ticket. I get it. Dennis Kucinich is the same way. He doesn't want to give up the Democratic Party, but I think the Democratic Party gave you up. And so what are you going to do? They broke up with you. You at some point have to accept it. And this is one of those times I think that, but hey, the challenge is helpful for press, I think, to continue challenging Joe Biden. I do think that helps from a media perspective, of course. They want to see, oh, this, you're being censored, you're being silenced, you're not being allowed onto a debate stage with him. So I think that is actually good for your campaign for a while, but then there's going to be a period of time when it isn't. And I hope you pivot. That's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, well, I'm hoping you're not such a great soothsayer, Kim, and that the future
I
is yours.
understand. I totally get it. I get your perspective. I'm a realist. That's who I am. So, but
I think,
yeah.
look, you make a compelling argument, and I hope that the situation in our country is not as grim as you portray it, but it may be. We'll see.
Well, I wish you the best of luck. I'm a big fan of your campaign and your message. I've gone through a lot of the things that you stand for, and I think that you really do represent the majority of Americans. I really believe that. So I would love to see nothing more than a President Kennedy. That's what I would love to see. So, but, and that's, so that's why I'm just giving you my truthful opinion on that. But best of luck to you on the campaign trail. Definitely will be watching, and I'll definitely be following everything, and hope to talk to you again in the near future about it, about how
Me
things are
too.
going, which I hope they'll
I
go well.
always love, I always love talking to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Best of luck today and tomorrow on
Thanks.
Good Morning America. Well, guys, let me tell you about one of our great sponsors. You've heard me raving about Field of Greens, the ultimate solution to sneak all of your daily fruits and veggies into your diet by mixing a simple powder into your ice water, which tastes great. It tastes like iced green tea with lemon. Well, now Brickhouse released a new product that I've been loving called Lean. And this stuff right here is going to help you lose that weight. It's going to help you suppress your hunger cravings. It's going to help your body dump those extra sugars that you might be holding on to. So this is a really great product. It helps you maintain a healthy metabolism and stay motivated to reach your leaner, healthier self. And the best thing is, it doesn't give you the jitters or any other negative side effects. At least it doesn't for me. So I really like it for that reason. And I really like that it really does control cravings. And in the Field of Greens powder does as well. Honestly, if you drink that and you take this, you're not going to be craving junk food, which I have a big problem with. I'm not going to lie. So this has been really helpful. Field of Greens has been really helpful. If you would like to try either of these products or both, or anything else that Brickhouse has, they've got great products and all of them are made with high quality ingredients. Just head to fieldofgreens.com and use the promo code KIM to get 15% off your first order.